The Awakening of Joel Singer by Scott McCaffrey. Narrated by Luke Welland. Part 5. Heal or Die. Please like and subscribe. "He's back already?" Dr. Harrington said to Carol. It had only been 2 days since his original meeting with Joel. Dr. Harrington let him in regardless. "Welcome back," Dr. Harrington said as Joel entered and sat down. "You'll be pleased to know that we are shipping state-of-the-art research equipment up to your house, discreetly, of course." "I'm glad to hear that," Joel replied. "I came for another reason, however." Joel went on to explain his encounter with his father and how it made him want to open the Reform Center, much the same way he had to Tina. "I'm sorry to hear about your sperm donor," Dr. Harrington responded to the story. "I'm also sorry to say that most drug addicts are like him and won't change. I've done some studying in this area. Some prison drug rehab programs have success rates as low as 10%, despite being run by well-intentioned people like you. I'm afraid programs to rehabilitate criminals don't fare much better. Over 2/3 of released criminals are arrested again within 3 years, over 80% within 9 years. It's admirable that you would try to foster convicts' better natures. But by the time most convicts make it to prison, there isn't much of a better nature to foster." "But that's where my unique skills could be helpful," Joel replied. "I think I could devise a way to screen out intractable criminals and addicts." "How much time is this center going to take from your research?" Dr. Harrington asked curtly. "I can set up a lab in a private part of the center with equipment similar to what I'll have at home," Joel said. "I can build a lot of duplicate equipment myself. I also have a couple of people in mind to hire." "What about the budget? You're not going to get tax money for this." "The budget shouldn't be more than $20 million a year with a 1,000-person limit. I did some research, and I think it's fair to say I bring more money than that to No-Tech annually." "That's a big raise over $40 an hour." "It is," Joel admitted, but he was confident in his numbers. Dr. Harrington pondered for a few moments. "Fair enough. Let me introduce you to Ron Guerin, our lead counsel. If there's anyone who can get the permits for your center, he can," Dr. Harrington said as he hit a button on his phone. "Ron, I'm going to send over Joel Singer, our newest research engineer. He's got a plan for a philanthropic center to reform convicts that I want us to support and get approved." "That sounds great," Ron replied. "Send him over. I'm just wrapping up an appointment." Ron turned to the FDA staffer in front of him. "So, where were we?" Visibly annoyed, the staffer said, "We were discussing the final approval for Rhizon." Yes. So, we've run all the necessary trials on an expedited timeframe. The FDA will decide if all the necessary trials have been run, Mr. Guerin." Ron sat back for a moment. "Ryan, how long have you been with the FDA?" he asked the tall young man. "About 4 years. Why do you ask?" 4 years. That's longer than usual. You know, most guys cash in after less than 3 years, get a plum job paying twice as much with a pharmaceutical company they treated kindly when they were in Washington." "Are you offering me a bribe, Mr. Guerin?" "Not at all. Just giving a little insight into how things work inside the Beltway sometimes." "Thanks for the tip. In the meantime, I wouldn't jump the gun on this approval." That's good advice," Ron replied. "I only wish Congressman Granby had taken it." "What are you talking about?" the staffer replied, exasperated. "Congressman Granby, the chair of the committee that needs to approve the promotion of your boss to FDA director. You see, I'm afraid he's already announced the pending opening of the new No-Tech factory in his district," Ron said, with a look of exaggerated worry, angling his laptop so they could both see the screen. "Here he is at the ribbon-cutting ceremony. Oops," he added for good measure. "Actually, now that I'm remembering," Ron said as he pressed a couple of buttons. Suddenly the screen turned to a mosaic of 6 congressmen with glowing faces at ribbon cuttings. "Everyone on the committee has announced the opening of new factories." The FDA staffer was struck silent. "Hey, if we have to cancel these factories and your boss doesn't get that promotion, he's not going to blame you, is he?" The staffer still said nothing. "Don't worry. I'll call the congressman and tell them they've jumped the gun, starting with the Honorable Mr. Granby." "Then, that won't be necessary." "Are you sure?" Ron asked quizzically. You just said. Never mind that. From what I can tell so far, the trials you've performed are sufficient for approval. I think we can make it official as early as next week, in fact. I just have a couple perfunctory reviews to perform. CYA stuff, the staffer said with a chuckle. Well, I know you have another appointment, so I'll be on my way. Ron opened the door for Joel a couple of minutes later. The nattily dressed lawyer gave Joel a firm handshake and had him take a seat. Joel again explained his plan for the center. That sounds wonderful, Ron said in response. If only every science prodigy wanted to give back so generously, the world would be a better place. I hope it will be, at least by a little. I'm sure it will. Now, we just need to get the permits. I have a good working relationship with the state attorney general. I'm sure he'd support this. Let me get in touch with you after I speak with him. Thanks, I appreciate your help, Joel said. He gave Ron his contact information and took his leave. A couple of minutes and phone screeners later, Ron had Casey Palmer, the New York State Attorney General, on the phone. Listen, we got this science wonder kid working for us now. He wants to get this thing going, a prison or halfway house type of thing, focused on rehabilitation. No tech would fund it. It would be like a Ronald McDonald house for recovering degenerates. I don't think I could find another neighborhood in this state willing to have another prison or pseudo-prison in their backyard, Casey replied. This is going to have to go through the feds. I have some good contacts there. Well, then get in touch with them, Ron replied. This is one kid you want to owe you a favor, believe me, especially if it gives you an excuse to keep tabs on him at the same time. General Marquez crouched down next to Carrie. Nightfall had not brought relief from Bolivia's jungle heat, which was exacerbated by the good-sized backpack she was carrying. Sweat dripped off the general's nose and crickets drummed loudly in her ears, but they were not enough to distract her or Carrie from their mission. General, Carrie said, why don't you turn back? I can take it from here. Famous last words. I've lost too many cocky sidekicks on missions like this one. You're the one we can't afford to lose. As soon as I start thinking that way, I'm as good as dead. Come on, the depot is just up ahead. They could just barely see the weapons cache in the clearing now, which had been identified on an earlier reconnaissance mission. It was guarded by two of the men that had raided the nearby town by jeep earlier in the day, as had been the pattern of the last year. They had been unable to stop the murder of every male over 10, and the kidnapping of almost every female over 12. It had been all General Marquez could do to send a sniper squad to keep the thugs from raping the girls on the spot, and force them to leave behind a handful of the girls that had barely entered puberty. The trailer being used to hold weapons was 10 feet away from the heavy foliage where Marquez and Carrie hid. The guard on the side facing them had stepped away for a cigarette, leaving behind his beer bottle. We'll get him when he comes back, the general whispered. He could spot us then, Carrie responded. He won't, Marquez said, silently opening the backpack. The guard heard his bottle fall to the ground and walked back warily. He saw a small wildcat apparently licking his spilled beer. He approached carefully and got within 5 feet, close enough to tell it was a lynx, but oddly he still couldn't hear or see the wildcat lapping up his drink in the dim light. He got within 3 feet and pointed his gun at the lynx. Suddenly, the guard heard, "Why, this stuff is piss." The guard looked down at the wildcat in shock for a moment, realizing it was fake, then turned to his left and looked into the brush. He was met with a silenced bullet through his forehead. The sound of the guard hitting the ground brought his cohort from the other side. He was met by Carrie's strong arm around his throat as he turned the corner. The guard's chest and the side of his lifeless skull hit the ground simultaneously. General Marquez hopped down stealthily and joined Carrie. They peeked across the camp. About 50 yards away, the other raiders sat under a tent playing cards. There were about 6 at the table with their AK-47s right by their side. Twice that number milled about nearby. Looks like blowing up this bastard is the best we're going to do tonight, the general said, as her hefty cable cutter snapped off the lock. They moved quickly to take what weapons and bullets they could carry. A loud creak from the iron door made them both freeze. But luckily the raiders were in the midst of arguing with each other about a bad hand its recipient was sure was proof of cheating. 2 minutes later, General Marquez and Carrie were 100 yards away, when the C4 explosives combined with the ammunition inside the trailer to send a fireball 50 feet in the air. How long do you think that will stop them? Carrie asked, as they hustled through the jungle. Maybe a couple of days. the general responded. Long enough to hopefully get the women and children out of a few villages. And maybe by then the UN will send a security force, Carrie said ironically. I wouldn't let an alpaca sit on your tits while we wait for that, Marquez responded. Joel tracked down Stan at the gym at PS 132 in the South Bronx. He was refereeing a basketball game that was winding down in the small gym. There were no seats, and Joel had to stand in the 2-foot space between the sideline and the wall. He leaned against it, his hands pressing on the gray cinder block walls. At one point, toward the end of the game, Stan had to pull apart 2 teenage boys who were about to come to blows. Hey, Joel could hear him say to the instigator, don't you know that's a child of God you were about to hit? The remark seemed to shame the child, although the gruff way Stan had pulled the boy backward was something the boy would not want to repeat either, Joel thought. Joel could tell that Stan was trying to place him as he approached the ref when the game ended. Hi, I'm Joel Singer, he said to Stan as he extended his hand, declining to mention they had met once before. The older man seemed a little taken aback, but he accepted the gesture. Stan Mayhorn, he responded. I think I've seen you around. You haven't seen me doing as much good as you, Joel replied. I do as much as this old broken-down body can. I think that's a lot. In fact, I'm working for this company, No Tech, now. They've let me get the ball rolling on a new center to rehabilitate convicts. I've already got the necessary approvals, and I want you involved. Stan walked with Joel to the cafeteria. They sat down on the blue molded plastic seats that were placed around a table with a chipped wood veneer. Joel showed documents verifying what he had said. Look, Joel, Stan said, you seem like a nice young man. I'm not sure how the hell you got No Tech to spend millions on this thing, but that's beside the point. What isn't is that I'm interested in protecting potential victims, not their perpetrators. I want that too, Joel replied, but the truth is most convicts end up back on the streets. How do we keep them from creating more victims? I already know your answer, although you'll put it differently. Let's coddle them and be nice to them, and then they'll be nice to everyone else. I'm not saying that, but I've looked into this, and it seems right now that prisons don't do much more than punish criminals. Nothing wrong with that. But what are we giving victims in that case? Just the sadistic pleasure of seeing these prisoners suffer? If that's the best we can do, yes, especially if it acts as a deterrent. But we can do better than that. I'm a scientist with No Tech. My work has brought them a lot of success. We can use science to help identify prisoners who want to change their ways and help them do it. Science mixed with compassion. Take it from me, kid. These guys will just take advantage of your compassion. See it as weakness. That's what criminals do. I see what you're trying to do here, but I just can't help you. Nevada is pretty far from Wall Street for starters. Secondly, I do a little to try to keep kids out of jail, but hardened criminals aren't my thing. Your retirement was just announced in Investor's Business Daily, Joel said. Stan smirked. Boy, you really read all the way to the back of that paper, he said. Joel laughed at the self-effacing comment. So what, are all these millions from No Tech going to buy? Luxury apartments for these guys? Stan asked. No, it's going to be humane, not luxurious. And we're going to have on-site mental health care, job training, and drug rehab. Depending on what study you look at, as many as 75% of juvenile offenders have mental health problems, and more than half of those continue to have a diagnosed mental disorder as adults, but most aren't getting treatment. 85% of inmates are addicted to drugs or alcohol. And when most criminals are caught red-handed, they are drunk or high. I can bring some unique abilities to address these issues. None of that excuses what they do, Stan said. It doesn't. But ironically, it offers hope. Sending offenders to mental health treatment instead of prison can cut the risk of a violent offense down the road in half, and drug rehab can reduce the rearrest rate over 40%. I'm looking to improve on those numbers. And when are they getting out? Are thugs going to flock to get into this place to get released early? Stan asked. No one gets out early. That's part of the agreement we have with the federal government, Joel said. They spoke for another 2 hours along the same vein, including Joel offering to fly Stan's family out to Nevada or fly him back to New York on weekends. Joel finally got an agreement for Stan to give it the most tentative of tries. Stan paused for a minute. Don't think I'm going to take it easy on these guys. Joel shook his head. That's why I want you. You know the difference between being tough and being abusive." "All right, I'm in. Just give me a couple of months," Stan replied. "We open in a month." "Good. I'll have some idea of what kind of madness I'm getting myself into then." Ray had just gotten the call he had been dreading. Xavier had taken out a suede bullet in Long Island City, getting the Knights into a building that was pumping out 50 Gs a month between the heroin, fentanyl, prostitution, and boosted goods. But there was a complication. Jalen Jefferson, a 12-year-old straight-A student and guitar prodigy with dreams of playing Carnegie Hall, had gotten caught in the crossfire. Wrong place, wrong time. Only now his dad was talking. Since Xavier had been sloppy the first time, Ray was stuck cleaning up his mess. Ray flipped the prepaid phone closed after hanging up with Bruce and started to walk down the narrow driveway of his Bronx duplex to his new yellow Lexus, which sat isolated out by the curb. He hadn't even made it 2 steps when 2 Chevy Impalas rammed it from either side simultaneously. Ray ineffectually covered his ears to drown out the thunderous crash. Smoke started billowing out of it, and he could smell the radiator fluid and rubber burning. The entire front half of his hood was pushed in like a steel accordion. His trunk was crushed. The Impalas only had minor damage for some reason. The drivers jumped out of their respective cars, completely unharmed despite the full-speed collision. One was white, the other Latino. Both were tall and lithe, and wearing what looked like black army fatigues. The Latino man now approached the Lexus's hood. Ray, furious, pulled out his Glock to fire. But in the split second he needed to raise his gun, the white guy pulled a stone from his pocket and fired it with blazing speed at Ray's gun, knocking it well out of his hand with perfect precision. The young Latino man reached the Lexus's hood. The crash had created a sizable gap in the hood, into which the young man placed his hands. "Sorry about that, man," the stranger said to Ray. "Hope I didn't hurt the engine. Let's take a look." He flung the hood up so hard it broke off its hinges, sending it sailing up 15 feet in the air and an equal distance back. He reached down into the engine bay and lifted the entire motor out of the car. Hoses and cables hung off the big V8 as the man lifted the engine over his head and tossed it onto the street, splintering the road where it hit. His partner now came up alongside the car. "Nice rims," he said, referring to the special order spinning wire wheels. "I think you should have spent more on the tires, though." He then kicked the right rear tire so hard it popped with a bang like an M80 going off. "They're a little flimsy." Ray ran and retrieved his gun, firing angrily at the white guy the moment his enemy had his back turned. The bullet bounced off of him. The men strolled back to their Impalas and drove off. Joel felt his serotonin levels rise as Tina came through the security door of the Singer Reform Center, SRC for short. Joel had offered to name it the No Tech Reform Center, but Dr. Harrington had declined. Joel had been given free rein on how to manage the center's funds, which meant he had been able to hire Tina as his second permanent employee, right after Stan. She gave him a big hug as he stood in the entrance by his 15-foot by 15-foot office. Like the rest of the building, the room's walls were mostly white cinder block. The only piece of furniture was a cheap desk set. "So, have you had the grand tour?" Joel asked her. Tina giggled at this. "What's so funny?" he asked. "That's something Carlos says his old frat brothers would say to girls at their parties. Not him, though, of course. Yeah, right." "Who's Carlos?" Joel asked. "Oh, this boy I'm dating from Willimantic. You'd like him. He's from the island, too," she said, referring to Puerto Rico. "So I have more in common with him than with those country bumpkins in Connecticut. I'm actually really comfortable with him, and we laugh a lot. Kinda like how I am with you, you know? And he's really going places. He had to transfer from UConn to EastConn because of money, but he's going to graduate in a couple of years with a business degree. He's going to be one of those white-collar guys." "You're sure he didn't do anything to get kicked out of UConn?" "He said it wasn't that." "Good. Well, here, let me show you your office. It's right next to mine, but without all the fancy stuff." They both laughed. "Cool, I get a computer and everything," Tina said ironically, looking at the desktop. "Can I IM with it?" Yeah, I think so," Joel replied. But Tina had already found the icon and was absorbed with her new toy. "Okay, well, I have these forms that need to be scanned and sent back to the Federal Bureau of Prisons when you get a chance." "Uh-huh, just put them to the side there," Tina said distractedly. Carlos is asking me to confirm I'm being flown back to Connecticut on weekends. Yes, of course. I'll actually be going back too, and... Joel heard someone at the entranceway. It was Stan. Stan, you came, Joel said excitedly. You've arrived just in time for our 1-month anniversary. So would you like the grand... have you seen the place? Stan found himself on a second-floor balcony, looking down at what appeared to be a very large, very austere apartment complex. Everything was on just a couple of levels spread widely on the cheap land. The 3 buildings at the complex were made of beige cinder block, with the main dormitory looking more than large enough to hold 1,000 reformees, Joel's preferred name over inmates. The monotony of the complex was broken up by several basketball courts, tennis courts, and a football field. Joel had only admitted a handful of reformees so far, about half a dozen of whom were milling about outside. It wasn't all minimalist buildings and basic sports venues, however. Stan had also passed what, to his eyes, was a state-of-the-art laboratory, with well-stocked stations for dozens of people, new microscopes at the center of each, and then several suites with advanced equipment to train on various skilled trades. He noticed in the carpentry suite that while the screwdrivers and bandsaws were shiny and new, there were panels in several areas to separate those carpentry students, who would inevitably be holding equipment that doubled as weapons. He would soon learn other, less visible precautions had been taken. Well, Stan said, it looks like these convicts are going to have plenty of room to spread out, and better courts to play on than most of their victims. The prisoners will have their own rooms, 15 by 15, Joel replied. You want them to be nice and comfy, huh? No, I don't want them to go insane. I don't see any fences here, Stan continued. There is one, Joel said. Oh, an electric fence, Stan said. Yes, but the bracelets do more than keep them in. What do you mean? It looks like we're about to get a demonstration, Joel said, nodding toward 2 men on the basketball court who had begun to argue. The larger man brought his fist back to punch the other, then went woozy, falling to his knees before going unconscious. What, did someone press a button? Stan asked. You might say he pressed his own button, when his adrenaline and norepinephrine levels got too high. So now he just takes a nice nap? The bracelet signals his brain to lose consciousness and then wake up with what one might compare to a bad hangover. At least someone gets some punishment around here, Stan said. I've already got the ACLU pursuing legal action over the wristbands and the rule banning reductions in sentences, Joel replied. Of course, I've also got Judicial Watch suing over the big private rooms and the sports facilities. So you're pissing everybody off. You just might be doing the right thing, Stan said. We're screening some new reformees, Joel replied. Why don't you come with me? Joel took Stan to one of the smaller buildings. They passed through 2 more security doors and entered a Spartan, all-gray room. A goateed white man of about 20 sat in a molded plastic chair in front of a wood laminate table. Stan noticed a security camera with a red filter on it. Joel took the prisoner's folder from a guard in a standard blue uniform. It says here you robbed and assaulted John Stevens, a 75-year-old man. You hit him on the back of the head with a tire iron. He needed over 20 stitches and could have died. Yeah, I did, the prisoner said, head bowed. I'm sorry, but we'll be sending you back. Joel replied. What are you talking about? The man shouted. This facility is set up to best foster rehabilitation for those who desire it, not to give more comfortable accommodations to the remorseless. Joel left the cell, as the prisoner was escorted out by guards. Joel was followed by a bewildered Stan. What just happened back there? He asked. This place has unfortunately already gotten a reputation as a place for easy time. That machine that looked like a camera with a filter was tracking his brainwaves. Just the mention of his crime should have increased activity in his prefrontal cortex, where higher emotions like guilt are processed. And that guy's reading was flat as a pancake, Stan finished for him. Joel nodded. He didn't bother mentioning that he hadn't used the machine on the wall. The prisoners who make it in here are going to serve hard time, but not for the reasons they might expect, Joel said. Before Stan could ask what he meant, they were interrupted by Joel's phone. It was Dr. Harrington. Joel took his leave and headed to the lab, which was strictly off limits to all but him. Thanks for getting back to me so quickly, Dr. Harrington said on the other line. I've seen what happens when your messages aren't returned, Joel replied. Dr. Harrington chuckled. Who knew a sense of humor was among your many abilities? So, are we getting you back here next week to help cure a few more people and hopefully help pay for that reform center while we're at it? That was my plan, yes. Good. We've hit a wall with our research, and I've already told everyone you are going to get us through it. It wasn't working. Joel sat in what looked like a typical doctor's office exam room, but a little bit bigger and with more advanced equipment. Joel had been working with stage 4 cancer patients here all day at the lab in New Jersey. In the past, he had been able to intuitively send the right signal to the body to get it to heal itself. But the cancers in these patients were at such an advanced stage they had basically become one with the body. Damn it. His abilities were all about signaling, and these cancer cells ignored his signals, as the immune system worked to shut his signals down. He found himself unable to destroy the cancer cells without doing more harm than good. Joel left the patient with the lab assistant and headed out toward the car waiting to take him back to the airport. He didn't notice the sensor installed in the doorway, which is how Dr. Harrington wanted it. The CEO did make an appearance as Joel was passing through the sterile-looking hallway that passed near Dr. Harrington's satellite office. Joel was expecting more tough, detailed questions, but instead received a look of sympathy, or even empathy. Joel took the look as a compliment, since it suggested he considered Joel a peer as a researcher, a very small club. "That's the look I usually have on my face when I leave the lab," Dr. Harrington said, noting Joel's visible frustration. "If it wasn't, then I'd be aiming too low." Joel nodded. "I need to go back and do some more research, get more specific about what signal I'm trying to send. Let me know if there's any way I can help." Joel was buzzed through the security doors and headed out to the waiting Lincoln. Dr. Harrington stepped back into his office and buzzed the lab assistant. "Lab," the tech said. "Marge, it's Dr. Harrington." "Oh, yes, Dr. Harrington. Hello, how can I help you?" the tech stammered. "Did the scanner work properly?" Yes, sir. It registered his entire genetic makeup, chemical reactions, brain activity." "Good. Send me the data over the secure line," Dr. Harrington replied. Stan recognized him immediately. Larry Harding, the latest con to enter the center, had terrorized his own neighborhood. Stan was less surprised to see someone he knew than he was that Larry had never been nabbed for murder and didn't have a life sentence, a prerequisite for coming to the SRC. "Larry Harding," Stan said. "So, you finally got caught ruining people's lives with drugs." "Yeah. They had to get high on my drugs to get through your preaching." "Same old story, though, ain't it, Larry? The ones who needed it the most were the ones who never came. Well, now I've got a captive audience, don't I?" Stan said, referring to Larry and the 20 other men who had just gone into the counseling room. "You don't want to counsel me, old man. You got me where you want me with this Star Trek cereal box prize shit on my wrist. Go ahead, hit me. I can't hit you back." "You deserve worse, Larry. And you're going to get worse. You're going to learn about the lives you ruined, starting with Donna Snow." He was referring to a former high school dropout who had started a successful career as a dental hygienist before she got on Larry's heroin. "So, how's she doing now?" Larry asked, somberly, the smirk finally melting from his face. "She's doing her second stint in rehab, but she's doing well this time. You're going to find out more about that, though. You're going to help pay for it. Now get in there." Larry went in and took his place in the classroom with the other men. "All right, guys," Stan said to the group. "Show of hands, how many of you want to be here right now, hearing about the crimes you committed, the lives you might have screwed up for life?" No one's hand went up. "Okay, let me ask you another question. How many of you have kids?" This time, more than half the men raised their hands. "How many of you want them to end up here?" No hands went up. "You're about to go through the worst 3 hours of your life. But that's why you should be jumping for joy right now. Because it means that somewhere you have a shred of decency left. It means there's hope for you. My boss says rehab programs work better when folks are supporting each other, which is why when you do get out of here, you're all going to have a partner to kick your ass if you try to screw up again. And I'm going to be watching your ass too. So the program isn't just going to work better, it's going to succeed 100%. Now, let's get to work." "Robert, there's a call for you," Carol said over the intercom. Now's not a good time. Please tell whoever it is that I'll call them back. It's the police chief. There was a pause. Put her through. Chief Malone, it's an honor to speak with you. What are you doing to my city, Bob? I hope No Tech is providing your city with our latest breakthroughs.
I think you are, including a bunch of freak of nature vigilantes.
Vigilantes? What vigilantes? Are you really going to try to take me for a ride on the bullshit merry-go-round? I've been reading the papers. I've read about some incidents of some concerned citizens assisting the police. I've been reading about how witnesses are feeling bold and the criminals are feeling scared. I've been reading that ever since these concerned citizens showed up, the police have gotten a lot more leads leading to more arrests and convictions. I'm guessing that's what you're talking about? Crime went down before, too. By 80% about 10 years ago when we were serendipitously sent special trackers and cameras from someone who had the good sense not to get directly involved. Chief Malone replied, Crime has been cut in half again from those levels, all because the police have been more empowered than ever. That amounts to over 200 people this year, 200 more people who weren't robbed, raped, or beaten. Why don't you ask them about the more direct role these concerned citizens have been taking? Dr. Harrington asked. Because I'm busy asking you about the more direct role these concerned citizens are taking, starting with who are these guys, where did they come from, and what are they capable of? Well, to answer your third question, they do seem capable of handling most of the thugs out there, even the ones the taxpayers so generously supplied with weightlifting equipment in prison. I'm going to bet you could be a little more specific than that, Chief Malone replied, but I obviously haven't caught you in a forthcoming mood. You're going to get in that kind of mood if these freaks of yours so much as break a nail of any innocent person in my city. The chief hung up the phone without waiting for a response. It wasn't working again. He had come up with a compound that would signal cancer cells to self-destruct, but only once it could get their membranes to open, which they would not. You look frustrated, Joel heard. Looking up, he saw Tina at the door holding a magazine. Having a little trouble getting these cancer cells to open up for me, he explained simply. That shouldn't be surprising considering you're trying to kill them, Tina replied with a chuckle. Joel smiled back. She had a point. Why don't you take a break and come take a look at this fish I want to get for the tank? Tina had decided that the Spartan Reform Center had gone beyond plain to depressingly dour. She had insisted on getting a fish tank in her office to spruce things up, and had grown quite enthusiastic about choosing her fish. So check this one out, she said to Joel, pointing to an exotic-looking fish she had found online. It was an anglerfish, with its characteristic fleshy protrusion that looked just enough like a fish to lure in potential prey. Some anglerfish, such as the one Tina was now showing, used bioluminescence with symbiotic bacteria, causing the protrusion to glow, a trick he had used in his fight with the CVs. Brilliant, Joel exclaimed as he saw the photo. Thanks, Tina replied. I didn't know I had such good taste in fish. Well, no, that's not what I meant. That fish is a lousy choice for a fish tank. It wouldn't survive there and would eat all the other fish if it could. Oh, have you ever heard the expression quit while you're ahead? Well, I wasn't ahead, Joel replied, a little bewildered. Not until you showed me this. A fish? An enticement. An enticement followed by death. An enticement that is really a trap. I thought you were working on killing cancer cells, not fish. But that's just it. If cancer cells act much like their own organisms, like fish, perhaps we should attack them like their own organism. I'm not following. Maybe, instead of trying to target these cells like a bank safe, perhaps we should treat them like the gluttonous beasts they are. How would you treat them differently? Instead of searching for a compound that matches up just right to these cancer cell membranes, why not simply give them what they want? Some high-energy food. Because that would make them stronger? Not if you attached a harmful enzyme to that food that would kill the cell right after it ate. That might work, Tina replied non-committally. Yes, I think instead of looking for a proverbial needle in a haystack, I'm going to do some research on what kind of food these guys like. Thank you, little fella, Joel said to the picture of the monstrous fish. The chief was still trying to come down from her frustrating conversation with Robert Harrington that day. It was one of those rare late nights when she broke out the scotch tucked behind her chair. Who did he think he was, anyway? Juanita thought to herself, I don't care how much these carpetbaggers can bench press. They don't know this city the way I do. I don't need them bringing down a sledgehammer on situations that require a chisel. She left the police station and headed toward her beloved subway. She had a driver available whenever she wanted, but she liked to keep track of how they were doing with cutting out the fare jumpers and aggressive panhandlers, the quality of life crimes that so often led to bigger ones. She was just a block away when a Mercedes limousine pulled up beside her. A man in the back seat rolled down the window. "Need a lift?" The sharply dressed man of about 40 asked. Juanita figured perhaps she had a fan. "That's okay," she started to say, then she thought she might have recognized the presumptive VIP. "Do I know you?" she asked. "I know you," he replied. "I heard you might not be getting cooperation from NoTech." "Is that what you heard?" "It is. I might be able to help you with that situation." With that, he flashed him her card, which read, "Ron Guerin, Lead Counsel, NoTech." What kind of help are we talking about? Just then the light turned green. It being New York City, horns started blaring less than a second later. "Sounds like this isn't the best place for filling in details. Why don't you hop in? I'll buy you a drink. Or rather, NoTech will," he said, motioning toward the bar inside the limo. Juanita remembered speaking with the guy on the phone. He didn't seem like the type that would try anything funny, and she thought she could handle him if he did. Ron had the driver pull up to the curb. Juanita hopped in, flipping off a honking car that whizzed by her. The driver rolled up the screen after Juanita told him where to go. The chief requested a scotch, which Ron poured for her. "You were going to get to those details?" Juanita said. "There aren't many to tell right now," Ron replied. "What is it you want me to do for you then?" "Nothing." "That's something you have to ask for?" "It is. In fact, it's something you did for us in the past." "How so?" "In regard to our DNA trackers and adaptive surveillance devices." "So you know about those. And you mean I kept their existence quiet? That's this nothing you're being cute about?" "Yes. And then, as now, keeping a lid on things serves your interests. You were just the assistant chief of police when those little widgets came along," Ron said. So this man knew about the several promotions those widgets helped city politicians get. "What is it you're offering now, besides more sneaky assistance? Job security, another promotion?" "No, just a shitload of money." "You want to be a little more specific?" "Millions, tens of millions, for your share." "And what exactly is it I'm supposed to keep quiet?" "I'm not sure yet, myself. I'm taking a synergistic approach toward the details. I'm assembling a team that will show maybe the CVs aren't so invincible after all." CVs? Community volunteers. That's what our genetically amped up friends are called. "What about that character with the animals? Is he one of these CVs?" "Oh, him. Yes and no. He's a special case." "Is he the most dangerous of them, then?" "No, he'll be the easiest to handle." "Why? Is he weaker? Corruptible?" "No, even better. He's naive. You're going to have to give me some idea of what kind of stunt we're talking about here if I'm going to help you." "Let's just say you'll know it when you see it." "I'm going to need more than that." "I understand. I'm just going to need one thing in that case." "What's that?" "A message." "What kind of message?" "You just need to say, 'I've got you covered. I'm going to make sure the investigation doesn't lead to you.'" The chief paused for a moment. "Okay, give me your cell phone number," she said. No, I was thinking you could just call the switchboard and get routed to my voicemail, like you would if we had never met." "That sounds kind of risky." "Don't worry. I'll get a text when I get the voicemail and I'll delete the message immediately. Right after you've saved it on your own device, so I don't get the details until I've compromised myself." Ron tisked. "Committed yourself. Hey, Chief, what do you know? Here we are." The chief set down her tumbler on the minibar. "Oh, hell, why don't you take that with you?" Ron said, handing the glass back to her. "The cops shouldn't give you a hard time for an open container. I've heard you've got connections in the department." Juanita opened the door and got up to leave. "Oh, and Chief Malone," Ron said, If you decide not to help us, I still wouldn't go spreading word of our conversation. It would be a shame if the methods you used to get your present position came to light. I'm not sure how kindly the courts would look upon them." Malone gave a brief, hard stare before getting out and walking the last block to her brownstone. A rousing cheer went up at the lab in New Jersey. It was working. Joel, Dr. Harrington, and a handful of No-Tech's top researchers stood observing the 5 advanced cancer patients. The drug worked in the following way. The main molecule, simple glucose, was designed to hit the membranes of the cancer cells first. Most cancer cells had many times the normal number of insulin receptors and took in several times more glucose, and the drug was designed to match up accordingly. The main molecule was trailed by an attached, smaller molecule that entered the cell before the membrane closed. Once inside the cell, the smaller molecule would target not the unresponsive nuclei of the cancer cells, but rather their mitochondria. The molecule would interfere with acetylcholine release and therefore energy production. The cells would be unable to take advantage of the glucose on which they were gorging. To Joel's initial horror, the antecedent glucose infusion sometimes resulted in a frightening, visible growth of the patient's tumors. The cancerous growths would sometimes expand outward 1 or 2 inches in a matter of 3 or 4 hours, heaving against and stretching the patient's skin, only to die off and start to shrink away just as quickly. Joel had done it. He had turned cancer's great strength, its superior garnering of resources, and turned it against the disease, and he had done it without causing more harm to the patient. The drug would not work on all types of cancer. It was designed to work on carcinomas, fast-growing cells which constituted 80% of all cancers. Joel realized this would be small comfort to the other 20%, but that would have to wait, for now. Larry Harding had been released from the Singer Reform Center a week earlier and was back home in the Bronx, a free flight back being one of the Reform Center's benefits. He had decided to stop by St. Matthew's Baptist Church for the first time in 20 years. A few days prior, he had called his mother for the first time in a year, telling her he was a new man. She was overjoyed and had invited him to come over. His sister, Tracy, had been there, skepticism in tow. Larry couldn't blame her. It was the 4th time he had gotten out of prison, each time supposedly his last. Tracy had said she didn't care what he did anymore. She just cared how it affected his 2 kids. Larry was glad to hear that, because they were the ones he was living for now. They were the first ones he had gone to see. He told Tracy he already had a job at a special factory upstate making modular homes with a lot of other men from the same center. No-Tech had opened the factory for those having trouble finding work elsewhere. Most did find work elsewhere, though, helped by a program where the Reform Center would ensure the performance of the released prisoners, going so far as to compensate the employer for any damage caused by an ex-con, no shows included. They hadn't had to pay out yet. Some of the prisoners had also launched businesses, selling sculptures, paintings, and other crafts they had learned to make by uncovering talents nurtured in the prison. His story was just enough to make Tracy curious to hear what he would say when the pastor accepted his request to go up to the podium in the small church. The preacher had wrapped up his sermon about how Jesus came for the sinners and used it as a preface to introduce Larry. As excited as Larry had been to speak, he now felt a pit in his stomach. He went up anyway. "I'd like to thank Reverend Morgan for inviting me to speak today. I've come to talk briefly about my experience as a hardcore sinner. A criminal, in fact, and how I've been affected by the Reform Center I just got released from. The thing about prisons I'd been to in the past was they were not punishing a man. They were punishing an oblivious animal, like whipping a dog for eating a shoe the day before. It had no connection to my crime at all for me. I had simply been captured and put in a cage. My worst punishment came at this Reform Center, but I wouldn't have it any other way. You see, when I was cared for at this center, only then could I care for the lives I had ruined with the drugs I sold, and the pain was horrible. I would be happy to kill myself and end the pain, but that would just kill one more person, waste one more life. I don't deserve such an easy way out. My life is now devoted to stopping what I did from happening to anyone else, and trying to make up for what I did to my victims' families. I will fail at both of these, of course, but I will fail as a man. I will never know for sure when I have stopped someone from becoming a criminal. Only when I have not. I will never know how much of a family's pain I have made up for. Only that it will never be enough. My wound will be constantly reopened. My pain agonizing, but it will be the pain of a man. With that, Larry walked off the podium. There was silence at first, then a slowly building applause that came to a roar. Larry went back to his seat and sat down, but only after giving Tracy a bear hug, as tears streamed down both of their faces. "They're on me, B!" Carl yelled into the phone to Bruce. "Where am I supposed to go?" "Not here," Bruce yelled back. His business was getting killed as it was. More than half of his crew was in jail, and more than half of his revenue was gone along with them. Witnesses were blathering fearlessly, and when there weren't any witnesses, these guys seemed to know all their plans anyway. "Look, Holmes, I'm taking out the snitch bitch and then you gotta get me a place to chill," Carl said. "Carl, do not fucking come down here. Those freaks got everyone else, but they ain't got me yet, and that's the way shit's staying. I'll call you in 15 minutes when I hit the Bronx." "No," Bruce started to say. Carl had already hung up. Demetrius and his young charge were racing through traffic down Avenue B after the blue Mustang Cobra. They were chasing Carl Mack, the kingpin for the Knights in Brooklyn. The bug they had placed in the gang's hangout had picked up that he was personally going after Dottie Clarkson. Dottie, a 70-year-old grandmother, had seen him put a bullet through the eye of one of the suede bullets at the Peaceful Village housing project, barely missing her granddaughter. They had spotted him about 5 blocks back and were now within 4 cars. Carl was giving them a run for their money, trying to get away. He wasn't aware, however, that they had tapped his phones and heard him say he was going to kill Dottie. Demetrius called Dr. Harrington as the other CV weaved through traffic. The sound of screeching tires and the smell of burnt rubber filled the Impala. "What is it?" Dr. Harrington said. He knew Demetrius didn't call his private line for trivial matters. "Sir, we're trailing the night's Brooklyn kingpin, but we're having trouble getting closer. I'm not sure we can cut him off." "Maybe you should just track him down later then." "I don't think so, sir. It sounds like he's going to kill a witness right now." "Could you get him with a tranquilizer gun?" "Maybe, but sir, we didn't have time to give the lead to the police. There's no admissible evidence that he's going after this witness. We'd have to let him go to try again." "Are you sure he's going to kill her?" "He said he's going to take her out." There was a pause. "There is a line we weren't going to cross, Demetrius." "Not if there was any avoiding it, sir, that's true." "Do what you must. You have the dissolving bullets, correct?" "Yes." "Then take him out." Demetrius pressed on his ear to hang up. They came to a red light with Carl still 3 cars ahead in the left lane. Carl blew the light and illegally turned hard to the right, cutting off 3 other vehicles. The other car slammed to a stop, narrowly avoiding him. Demetrius and his driver found themselves boxed in. "What should we do?" the driver asked, turning to Demetrius. But Demetrius wasn't there. The driver looked out the windshield and saw Demetrius high in midair, somersaulting over the 2 cars in front of them, with a quarter twist to land squarely on the roof of a sedan that was cutting across the intersection, the same direction as Carl. Riding on top of a sedan, Demetrius got within 4 cars of Carl again, but he realized he had been spotted as they approached another light that was turning red. Carl now careened to the left, forcing an oncoming car onto the sidewalk and pedestrians to scramble like marbles. Demetrius had no choice but to leap onto another car that was cutting across the same way. His jump carried him 10 feet up and 40 feet forward, and he deftly landed on the roof of another startled motorist, an old lady too scared to stop or turn. But despite his heroics, he was losing ground, now 5 cars behind. Demetrius jumped again, 3 cars ahead onto an old Chevy. This driver was not as timid. He slammed on the brakes to throw Demetrius off the car. Demetrius felt the sensation immediately and somersaulted back to counter the push forward from the sudden stop. The driver sped off as soon as he saw Demetrius through his rearview mirror. The initiate leader landed on his feet but also in the middle of the street, 2 cars behind Carl. The thug honked his horn and stuck his middle finger out the window in defiance. Demetrius had no clean shot. The intervening cars all blocked him entirely and he could hear the screeching of brakes behind him. He only had a fraction of a second before a car barreled into him. Demetrius didn't hesitate. He crouched down slightly, pulled out his gun, and fired. Then somersaulted back and left. The oncoming car, horn blaring, missed him by a foot. The bullet ripped through the rear window of the car he had just left, passing through a pumpkin spice latte, and then the windshield on the passenger side. It then whistled by the ear of Miss Rosita Panchero in the next car, missing her cheek by 2 inches. The angle was necessary for the bullet to reach its final destination, through the Mustang's headrest and into the skull of Carl. His car veered wildly into the oncoming traffic. Its rear end got clipped hard by an oncoming car, and it spun violently into a telephone pole with a loud crunch. Carl's head rested on the steering wheel, his blood and brain matter on the windshield in front of him. Demetrius observed the end result for about 5 seconds before his partner screeched to a halt beside him. He leapt over the car and got in the passenger side. They were 2 miles away by the time the police arrived. There was a decent crowd at Murphy's. Ron and Dr. Harrington saw as they shuffled across the distressed natural wood floor in the dimly lit Irish pub. It was a monthly tradition for Dr. Harrington and Ron, part of Dr. Harrington's folksy billionaire routine, he would sometimes say. The usual mixture of American and European sports, soccer along with Irish football played on the big screen TVs. "How is the FDA approval coming on Penavate?" Dr. Harrington asked. The name was a mixture of the penetration and deactivation their new cancer drug involved. "I think we might actually get it in 4 months, a new record," Ron replied. Just then Ron's iPhone went off. Ron glanced down at it but shut it off. "I wonder what the news is saying about it," he said. "There was nothing in the papers this morning, but let's get an update." Ron saw his boss pull up a news website on his phone. A shocked expression suddenly crossed Robert's face. "What is it?" Ron asked. Just then, a special report broke in on the Yankees game. "This is Keisha Williams reporting from New York. There's been a terrible explosion in North Korea. We are getting reports the explosion came from a nuclear reactor they were covertly building in the northern part of the country. At least 5,000 people are suspected dead, based on satellite surveillance alone. Experts are warning 100,000 could die from cancer caused by the radiation." "My God," Ron said. "The North Korean president is refusing aid from American imperialists and all other outsiders, in his words. The crops in the area are ruined. Over 1 million people could die of starvation, experts are also estimating. It is speculated troops will not be sent to assist because of the radiation. There are also fears that food will be hoarded in Pyongyang, in case the whole country's food supply is affected." Dr. Harrington looked genuinely horrified. They and everyone else in the pub sat in silence, followed by hushed murmuring. "Should we send money?" Ron finally asked. "No. The dear leader and his cronies would just pocket it. But there must be something we could do," Dr. Harrington said. He sat in silence for a moment. "Could we get our hands on 1,000 radiation suits? I guess, would you like to donate them to Red Cross or UN aid workers?" Dr. Harrington sat thinking grimly again. "We're not donating them. The initiates are going to wear them when they go to North Korea." "Bob," Ron said, shaking his head, "I really don't think that's a good idea. You could start a war." "No, not if we do it right. We would simply set up refugee camps and allow for safe passage to them, and then we would get the anti-cancer pills to the victims of radiation poisoning." He was referring to the positive effect Penavate had shown on precancerous cells. "Some pill from mysterious, intimidating Americans that these people have been brainwashed to hate and distrust. A lot of them won't take it." "You're right. But there's another way to effect the same treatment," Dr. Harrington said. "Do you mean sending the kid?" "Yes. I think he can take a brief break from coddling criminals to save thousands, if not millions of people. Get him on the phone. We're sending a team next week. Of course, we should check with our government first. They might appreciate a heads up." "Yes, I know what they want to hear," Ron replied. Joel sat in the back of the room watching Stan do his thing. "All right, gentlemen. We're learning how to change diapers today. That's right. I said changing diapers," he said. "That's woman's work," one of the men heckled. No. This is man's work, real man's work. Because what makes a real man? So you can kick some asses. You can have sex with some girls. So can a dog. Now what makes a man? All together now. The crowd knew the drill. A real man takes care of his kids. A real man owns up to his responsibilities, they said in a mocking drone that nevertheless showed a grudging respect. Did the men find the words about straightening out their lives a little cliché? They always did. What wasn't cliché, a few reformees had told Joel, were the actions behind the words. The best area counselors brought in, others flown in as needed, the job training and placement, the men there being treated like people, all giving the men the tools so they could own up to their responsibilities. That's right, Stan continued. And what percentage of kids in prison have absent fathers? 85%, the crowd repeated with the same tone. Right again. But the percentage of your kids with absent fathers is going to be 0%. Joel's phone went off before he could hear the next part of the presentation. A call followed by a text. As always with texts from Dr. Harrington, this one was marked urgent. Joel headed to his office to return the call in private. Dr. Harrington, it's Joel. You're leaving tomorrow for North Korea. North Korea? How? I'm getting a ship. What's this all about? Jesus, Joel, don't you get news updates out there? Thousands are dead from a nuclear accident. Over 1 million more could die from starvation or radiation poisoning. My God, I'm afraid we can't wait for him. Make preparations. Dr. Harrington, they'll sink the ship if we enter their waters. I've thought of that. It's not your concern. You're going to cure precancerous patients. What about the pills? You'll be briefed on the ship about why we need your help and how you'll provide it. But our government, you'll be sent a secure email where and when to get on the ship. But Joel heard the dial tone on the other end. Madam President, you need to look at this, Secretary Romwell said as he entered the Oval Office. She was holding the daily intelligence briefing. What is it, Jack? President Horner asked. She was a young president, tall and fit, but the job had already produced flecks of gray in her sandy blonde hair. NOTEC has just bought a full-size cruise ship. They used a shell corporation to buy one that had already been out to sea. What the hell are they up to? The president asked. Just then the phone rang. It was the president's personal assistant. Yes, Teresa, what is it? I'm in an important meeting. Yes, Madam President, I have an important call for you. He says it's a matter of life and death. It often is with my job. Who is this clown? Dr. Robert Harrington? He's just outside the White House gates. Dr. Harrington entered the Oval Office, exchanged handshakes and greetings with the secretary and the president, and sat down in the remaining chair. So we meet again, Robert, the president says. I was told it was a matter of life and death. Is that how you're framing your regulatory concerns now? You know why I'm here, Madam President. You know why I showed up today instead of calling ahead 6 months in advance. And why is that? We're going to save those people in North Korea. Really, how much is NOTEC giving into what fund? We're not giving a dime to be confiscated by that despotic regime. We're going, personally. Who's we? The secretary asked. A team of volunteers who can do what needs to be done. The same volunteers who have infested New York with their mysteriously attained skills, Robert? Romwell asked. Dr. Harrington ignored the question. Look, any actions you want to take will have to be cleared by the State Department, the president said. Cleared by the State Department? That hardly seems like the most discreet way to go about this mission, nor does it seem like the most beneficial for you. The most beneficial for me? The president said. Yes, that's right. It's really very simple. You make sure we're not interfered with, and you can take credit for a daring mission that saved millions, or, if things don't go as planned, you can disavow any knowledge of the mission's true nature. The president and secretary looked at each other for a moment. What exactly do you have in mind? The secretary asked. It's best if you don't know details, but I can tell you this. It's strictly a humanitarian mission. No one will suffer so much as a scratch. Well, I'm not an expert on North Korean military technology, the president said, but I'm pretty sure their torpedoes will put a scratch on whatever jury-rigged ship you're planning on taking over there, and the designer babies riding on it. I've accounted for that. The president and Romwell exchanged glances. Romwell nodded. Everyone in the room knew that Horner was behind in the polls and could use the boost. After some further discussion, they agreed to make sure the ship would fall off the Coast Guard's radar. I'll take care of things on our side, the secretary said. Thank you, Madam President, Mr. Secretary, Dr. Harrington said, shaking their hands. You've helped end the days of ignoring atrocities. When Dr. Harrington had left, the president shook her head as she looked at the secretary. What's the deal with this guy, Jack? Is he a megalomaniac? Is he after money, power, fame? No, Madam President. That man is worse. That man is a true believer.